Is it possible to talk about the underbelly of Sherbrooke and even dare to say that open war has been declared there? Would it be more accurate to say that we are carrying out a thorough cleaning, motivated by fear or caution in an unsavory part of town? It is certain that things have been happening since the beginning of June in what is now agreed to have been two settlements of accounts, that of June 24th and the double of July 6th. These denote that certain people do not feel good about themselves and perhaps others fear for their lives. La Tribune, July 8th, 1978. S-Town. I'm not talking about Woodstock, Alabama. It's right here in Sherbrooke, 1978. S-Town, Sleazetown, Shittown. This is, of course, a veiled reference to the popular podcast from the producers of Serial and This American Life. But before anyone becomes offended, I like Sherbrooke. There's always a tendency to run down any place from your past. The West Island of Montreal was a dump. St. John, New Brunswick was the arsehole of Canada. Toronto always had an inferiority complex, and Scarborough, where I currently live, was a podunk mill town before it became overrun by college intellectuals. Whenever I visit the townships, I try to see a little light in the place because the darkness of its past can smother you. When I'm in Compton, I order breakfast and skim the JDM at the same diner every time, and I never let on who I am or what brought me there. When Patricia Pearson and I visited a number of years ago doing research for our book, we ensured we made some time to do some good things. You must invest time to see the good. Kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. This is Who Killed Teresa. On the afternoon of Thursday, July 6, 1978, high schooler Alain Boulanger was riding his motorcycle on the back trails south of Lennoxville when he spotted a man lying on the ground off Astbury Road near Route 143 and about 11 kilometers south of Sherbrooke. Alarmed, Boulanger rode home to tell his mother. And this is how you know you've arrived in S-Town. The mother immediately informed her child to go back and check to see if the man was dead. The investigation in this case was led by Sergeant Marceau, assisted by detectives Réal Chateauneuf from the Carole Facteau case, Noël Bolduc, and Roch Goudreau from the Criminal Investigation Bureau of the Sûreté du Québec Eastern Townships Divisions. SQ Constable Michel Poulain was the first to arrive on the scene. The man was lying in a pasture and had been shot 9 times. About 20 meters from the man, police discovered the body of a woman. At first, they thought she too had been shot, so severe was the trauma to her head. On closer examination, police discovered she had been beaten, possibly with the butt end of a rifle, and strangled by a cord that still remained around her neck. Recall that Louise camera also had a cord around her neck. About 7 kilometers north at the Lennoxville golf course, police soon discovered an abandoned 1970 Cadillac registered to Manon Bergeron of 325 High Street in Sherbrooke. From this, police were able to determine that the bodies in the pasture south of Lennoxville were 20-year-old Manon Bergeron and her 38-year-old boyfriend, Raymond Grimard. And as always, if you want a geographic visualization of these locations, we now have a Google map, and you can find that at this entry on the website theresalore.com, www.theresalore, theresalore.com. Autopsies were performed on July 8th. The forensic pathologist reasoned that Grimard and Bergeron had been dead for about 48 hours, but no more than 72 hours. Grimard was shot with a .22 caliber rifle, 4 times in the back of the head, twice in the front of the body, once in the left shoulder, once in the left thigh, and once in the index finger of the left hand. Bergeron had 6 wounds on the back of her head caused by a blunt object. Grimard died from the multiple skull fractures to his head. The pathologist said that Bergeron could have been killed by blunt force trauma or asphyxia or both. No shell casings were recovered from the Astbury Road site, nor were there significant quantities of blood in the pasture, meaning the crime scenes had been somewhere else. Grimard and Bergeron were not assassinated south of Lennoxville. Raymond Grimard was well known to police. He'd been in trouble with the law several times. Known as Le Loup, the Wolf, Grimard lived with Manon Bergeron at that apartment on High Street, and it was located equidistant from the Jetain headquarters on Rue Montreal and the Sherbrooke Hussars headquarters on Winter. Each were within walking distance. Raymond Grimard was a former waiter at the Hotel Normandy, better known as the Moulin Rouge, at the corner of King and Wellington in downtown Sherbrooke. Manon Bergeron worked as a bartender in similar establishments. Grimard and Bergeron were seen in the Cadillac by several witnesses driving around the King and Wellington corridor the evening of July 5th. Bergeron's brother-in-law, Guy Robert, reportedly was the last person to see the couple alive, accompanied by Grimard's children at a house on Rue Gault at approximately 12:20 a.m. July 6th, 1978. So Gault, High, King, Wellington, our map is getting very congested. Concerning High Street and the apartment where Grimard lived with Bergeron, a listener wrote about this because I had posted a photo of it. And they said, I lived on High Street from 75 to 77. A horrible area to live. I moved out the morning police came to my door and said my neighbor, my landlady, who was 86 and blind, was beaten the night before. She died a day later. I was harassed all the time and never felt safe. Bikers on welfare hung on the street night and day. Now, Rue Gault, where they were last seen by the brother-in-law, that's interesting. Gault bifurcates the working class neighborhood where Manon Dubé lived from the rougher area to the north, King and Wellington, the urban landscape where Bergeron and Grimard ostensibly worked. bartender and waitressing, though I would argue that Grimard probably never worked a legitimate day in his life, opting for contract assignments, if you will, drug peddling, sous la table. Then there's where they were found, or better, where Bergeron's Cadillac was found in the gravel lot of the Lennoxville golf course. And if you go to the website, I've drawn for you a little red line that denotes the walking path that leads from that golf course to Champlain College. This path is infamous, where for over 40 years students have been complaining about sexual assaults along that path, and criticizing the school for their refusal to light it. And I know we've said this many times. This is a small town, a small area. This all may mean nothing, but this little crime world is becoming very small indeed. If you connect the golf course to the campus, I mean, not only a 40-year history of issues, specifically in 78, a number of complaints of sexual assaults on the campus and in the town of Lennoxville, in addition to the disappearance of, and would eventually be murder of Teresa Lohr. Where they lived, where they worked, where they were last seen, where they were found. To me, it's just fundamental that you would want to know these things. Recently, the Sûreté de Québec's cold case unit boasted to me how they had finally traveled to the eastern townships and visited where Teresa was last seen, where she lived, where she was found, where her wallet was found, etc. And they were visibly very, very proud of this accomplishment. Now their unit's been in existence for since 2004, and so I'm struggling to understand why it took them 18 years to do this. They've also mentioned to me on three separate occasions over the last 4 months, how in 1979, after Teresa's body was found, the Quebec police held a town hall in Compton and interviewed practically every member of the community. And that's great. But the fact is, they at that point had 4 murders and 1 suspicious death, all in their Astbury district. The majority of these cases with ties back to north near Sherbrooke. The majority with associations and inner associations with the King and Wellington corridor. They should have focused their efforts there, in that area of Sherbrooke, because the people of Compton knew nothing. As with Carol Fecteau, whose body was found 12 days earlier in East Hereford, Grimard and Bergeron had been stripped of their identity papers, their wallets and such. When Sûreté du Québec officer Réal Chateauneuf arrived at the Astbury Road site, he found $19 and a piece of paper on Grimard's body. That's all that he had. And the paper contained a phone number and the name Tricia Hall. The phone number matched that of the local Sûreté de Québec's headquarters, and Patrick Hall was a detective with that detachment. From this information, it was surmised that Raymond Grimard, Le Loup of the Sherbrooke criminal underworld, had turned and was now working as a police informant. Officer Réal Chateauneuf would later reveal that on July 4th, so preceding these murders, police had Grimard and several of his crew under surveillance. and they followed a number of cars and motorcycles from Sherbrooke to North Hatley. This party spent approximately a half hour casing a bank in the village, all under the watchful eye of the SQ. And police suspected the gang was planning a holdup, but they called things off when they began to suspect they were being surveilled. And this cadre included Raymond Grimard, Jean Charlin, Mario Valliers, and Fernand Laplante. We know Jean Charlin. We've talked about him before. Mario Valliers was a small-time hood who testified that he sold about $500 worth of drugs per week to Charlin and the Wolfman, Raymond Grimard. And according to him, Carol Facteau, in turn, was a drug dealer for Charlin and Grimard, working the streets of King and Wellington. Based on all the evidence he had gathered, Officer Réal Chateauneuf began to believe that someone had learned that Grimard was working for the police, and that this was the reason for the execution. Why else strip them of the identity, yet neglect to remove the piece of paper that tied him to the police? But then it gets tricky. Was this a message from the Sherbrooke underworld? Or was the paper with the name and number of Tricia Hall planted on Grimard to detract attention from the real police informant? And I'll give you one better. Was the paper even planted by the murderers? Or was it, in fact, put there by the police themselves to detract other investigators from the trail of their real informant? That's right. In S-Town, it's very hard to know who to believe or who to trust. Everyone is a little bit compromised. You know, yeah. Raymond Grimard, Wolfman, the Wolfman, Le Loup. These guys in this milieu, they all, get nicknames and such. I think there's one guy called, Le Prof, and he was probably called Le Prof because either he was really smart or he was really dumb. Wolfman, from looking at pictures of Grimard, I suspect he was a really hairy bastard, and that's why they called him Wolfman. 38-year-old guy running around with a 20-year-old. And Manon Bergeron never gets any respect in these stories. She's always just referred to as his concubine. And there's the level of consideration they give to that victim. Again, she's an afterthought to the main attraction, which is the criminal Grimard. She's just much like Facteau, collateral damage in this affair. In Grimard, as I say, he's none too attractive. We know what he was there for. He supplied the drugs, baby. You supply the love. That's Grimard's shtick. Exactly why Grimard was murdered, I don't know, and we'll get to that, or maybe we'll never get to the bottom of that. We'll have to wait and see. But so we talked about Charlin, we talked about Valliers, we talked about Grimard, and then there was this fourth guy mentioned, Fernand Laplante. So who was Fernand Laplante? La Tribune effectively summed up the puzzle. We talk about a cleanup, shady surroundings, war, simply because the similarities between the murder of Carol Facteau, a waitress in Sherbrooke whose body was discovered in a stream in East Hereford on June 24th, and the double murder of Chemin Astbury 3 miles from Lennoxville are many. First, the young girl, like the couple, was shot at point-blank range. In addition, care had been taken to remove the identity papers from the 2 victims. Then, each victim frequented more or less the same environment, saw the same world, and stood in the same kind of gambling milieu. Finally, the very way in which the care was taken to eliminate these people proves that we are dealing with people from a very specific background, where human life is less important than certain current affairs. It's La Tribune, July 8th, 1978. This is Who Killed Teresa. If you're just joining us, you've come in the middle. We're going to stay with this story of Grimard, Bergeron, Facteau for a while, so we'll come back next time and discuss it further. Obviously, there's a whole lot more to discuss here. This is just the setup, man. We haven't gotten to the main course. If you like the podcast, please follow us. Go to the website, teresalore.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all of these various platforms. Even further, you can do us a solid by buying the book "Wish You Were Here," which will be released in 2 weeks in the United States. Just you can go to your favorite bookshop and say, hey, pre-order it. Wish You Were Here. Myself, John Lord, Patricia Pearson. And if you really like it, you can just go and give it a 5-star rating on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or something like that. That'd be sweet. That'd be super sweet. Most appreciated. That's all for this week. This has been Who Killed Teresa? Life isn't fair. Some cops aren't smart and dedicated, like on television. I'm your host, John O'Lore. Have yourselves a great, great